Good morning, everyone. Welcome to News Brief, Sealand News Brief. Today is January 19th. Okay, first we want to take a look at the interest rate. Again, presented by Fairway Home Loan. This would be third week of the year, and the 30-year fixed mortgage rate is 3.75. Look at the last week. Last week was 3.49. So for 2 weeks, it going up continually. Of course, there's some local ups and downs, but why is happening? Basically, 10-year Treasury yield is going up, 1.841. Also, look at the trend. A year ago, it was 1.092. Then a month ago, it was 1.48, and last week, 1.746, and this week, 1.841. So the 10-year Treasury yield keep going up. That is why the 30-year fixed mortgage also going up, and 15-year mortgage and FHA also moving up. 자, 지금 2주 안에 이자율이 굉장히 지금 올라가고 있는 상태죠. 그 전까지는 꽤 오랜 기간 동안, 작년에도 그랬고, 꽤 오랜 기간 동안 3% 정도의 플러스 마이너스 이렇게 내려갈 때는 2.7, 2.6까지 내려갔고, 또 올라가서 또 3% 이렇게 쭉 하다가 지금 last 2 week 사이에 아까도 우리 프레젠테이션에서 얘기했지만 올해 스타트가 별로 지금 모기지 쪽에는 별로 안 좋은 상태입니다. 그래서 두 주 사이에 3.75까지 지금 올라와 있다. 그리고 아까도 얘기했지만은 this year we might have 5 times Fed's interest rate increase. But some people are saying 7 times, and some people are saying about 5 times. That means each time they're going to raise 0.25% reference rate. Okay, right now 0 to 0.25, 0 to quarter. So if the Fed increase the reference rate 5 times, that means 1.25% will be increased. That means the interest rate, reference rate becomes 1.25 to 1.5%. Okay, and we did through today's seminar, we kind of covered the detailed conforming loan balance. And okay, let's take a look at the first news. The first local news is New Jersey keeps increasing in property tax in 2022. So every year, without any failure, every year property tax is being increased. Let's take a look at a little bit of detail. Average New Jersey tax increase right now, average tax is $9,266. That's the New Jersey average. This is about 2% increase. In dollar amount is $154 compared to the last year. But the most Korean populated towns also significant increase. For instance, Edgewater increased to, we're talking about average, entire town average becomes $10,792, which is up 16.5% from last year. And the second place is Paramus. Paramus is used to be known as kind of a low tax town, but they increased 6.1% to average now Paramus 10,596. Which is the first time above $10,000. And Leonia and Richfield also increased 3.8% and 2.7% respectively, while Palisade Park and Foley is increased only 1.6% and 1.5%, so relatively smaller increase. But it's interesting, Ingrid Cliffs and Old Tappan, they actually dropped the property tax like 2.7% and 2.2%. So that's kind of interesting. So two towns, you can remember, Ingrid Cliffs and Old Tappan. And still, Tenafly is the highest tax town in Bergen County, which is average $21,966. 뉴저지가 계속해서 프로퍼티 텍스를 이제 올해도 올리게 되는데 약 전체적으로 2% 정도 올리는데 달러 어마운트는 한 154불 되겠다. 지금 뉴저지 전체 에버리지 텍스는 9,266불 정도 되는데 각 타운마다 조금씩 인크리즈가 달라서 가장 많이 올라간 타운이 엣지워로고요. 엣지워로가 이제 에버리지 한 1,792불 정도, 그래서 16.5% 올라갔고 파라무스는 6.1%가 올라가서 1,596불이 됐다. 파라무스가 우리가 보통 얘기할 때 텍스가 낮은 타운으로 우리가 이제 알고 있는데 두 타운 다 이제 10,000불, 에버리지 10,000불이 넘어갔다. 그리고 레오니아하고 리치필드는 뭐 3.8%, 2.7% 가까이 올라갔고요. 팔리세이드 파크하고 포틀리가 비교적 많이 안 올라간 타운이다. 1.6%, 1.5% 올라갔다. 그리고 근데 한 가지 재밌는 거는 잉그루드 클립스하고 올타판이 조금씩 내려갔다고 지금 보고가 되어 있습니다. 그래서 잉그루드 클립스가 2.2% 내려갔고 보통 잉그루드 클립스가 이자가 비교적 낮죠. 하이스쿨을 운영하지 않고 있기 때문에. 근데 2.2%가 내려갔고 올타판이 2.7%가 내려갔다. 역시 그리고 제일 버겐 카운티 중에서 제일 타운이 텍스가 센 타운은 테너플라이. 에버리지가 21,966불이 되고 있다. Okay. The next news is Manhattan rent is recovered to pre-pandemic level. That's good news, or for tenants it's not so good, but for general market it is good. According to Douglas Elliman, which is one of the biggest companies, broker companies in Manhattan. Okay, and so December 2021, the median rent is $3,392 in Manhattan and went up 21% from a year ago. Okay, and now that is higher than December 2019, which means now it went over the pre-pandemic level. And December, so Manhattan, yes, basically rent recovered to pre-pandemic level. Actually, it's over to pre-pandemic level. And about Queens, in Queens, median rent right now is $2,715, and also is higher than December 2019 pre-pandemic level. Especially northwest area in Queens, the available rental units only 614 units, and it's down 74.8% from a year ago, which was available unit was 2,435. So rent is recovering. Some area is more than the pre-pandemic level right now. 맨하탄 렌트가 좋은 소식이 들어와 있는 뭐 좋은 소식이 될 수도 있고 테넌트들한테는 그렇지 않겠지만 아무튼 지금 프리-팬데믹 레벨을 이제 완전히 리커버 되고 그다음에 더 올라갔다. 그래서 지금 맨하탄의 작년도 디셈버, 2021 디셈버에 3,392불이다. 미디언 렌트가. 근데 그게 지금 1년 전 대비 21% 올라간 거고, 그다음에 그 2년 전, 그러니까 2019년 디셈버에 비해서 보다도 더 높이 올라갔다. 그런 상태고요. 퀸즈 쪽에도 마찬가지 현상이 보여지는데, 특별히 노스 웨스트 지역의 퀸즈 지역, 한인분들이 많이 사는 타운이죠. 노스 웨스트. 그 지역의 북서 쪽이죠. 지금 현재 어베러블 렌트가 614억밖에 안 된다. 그게 그래서 1년 전 대비 74%나 줄어든 그런 상태다. And well, this is kind of interesting statistics. According to census, among 3.4 million residential units in NYC. So NYC has a total residential unit. It took 3.4 million units. Among them, 850,000 units are in Manhattan, and 60% of units in Manhattan is rental complexes. So that's kind of interesting statistics. Okay, let's move to next news. Office rent gets a boost on freebies. Today's Wall Street Journal reported. This is interesting because recent recovery of U.S. office rent owes much of its success to something landlords hate to discuss. Landlord doesn't like this kind of situation, but rent is boosted because of all freebies, cash gifts, and other incentives that they have to fork over to tenant. But simply saying, landlord has to give more incentives to office tenants, especially. Used to be office lease incentives are very small. They didn't have much incentives to office tenants, office building tenants, but that changed because the private equity firms, for instance, we know that Blackstone and BlackRock, I believe BlackRock is bigger than Blackstone, but it's all private equity firms. That means the company who received investment money from the individual, and they managed their wealth. Of course, try to increase their wealth. So that's private equity firms. So they invest other places, but they invest money too where? Like real estate, like REITs. Okay. We're going to talk about the next news. Blackstone Property Funds passes 50 billion through Blackstone REITs. But it's kind of related news. So now, why the private, especially private equity firms, give more incentives to tenants? This is the reason. The property equity firms, the wealth management companies, they don't have interest to keep the property once they purchase office building, right? They don't have interest to keep this building for long term. What they want to do is they just want to increase the value of the building, and maybe 2 years, 3 years, 4 years later, they want to sell this building so they can get the profit. So how they can increase the office building value? They want to increase rent roll income. So they don't want to keep the vacant spaces in the office building. They want to fill the tenant as much as they can, as many tenants as they can. So what they do, they want to provide more incentives to tenant. So quickly they can get the tenant and make full occupancy. So building value goes up and then sell. So that's why they do. So like, for instance, Blackstone offers $100 per square feet in TI. TI means the tenant improvement. So what does it mean? The landlord provides $100 per square feet, this money to the tenant, so the tenant can improve the interior. Okay, typically about $30 to $35 per square feet. There's a tenant improve the money that a landlord provides to the tenant. Okay, tenant receive this money and then they can improve the interior. So Blackstone, for instance, they offer 3 times of TI. So if Blackstone does that, then eventually other landlords started copying the private equity firms. So that's why these days the office tenant will get some really decent incentives. Let's take a look at this chart here. Okay, what we're seeing here is the rent per square feet at the Manhattan prices office leads. This is year 2016. Year 2016, this was lighter green was average rent, and but after incentive, the effective rent is this darker green. Okay, this is so average rent, but this is a sort of effective rent. Okay, but year 2017, 18. Now let's look at the year 2021. The average rent. This is average rent, and this is effective rent after incentives went down. Okay, so generally went down, but effective rent also went down more significant rates. So that's year by year. So let's look at the year 2020. A lot of incentives. Okay. Because it is a pandemic situation. And this is a pre-pandemic, but now the year 2021, even more incentives provided to the office tenant. 자, 지금 우리가 보고 있는 거는 지금 오피스 랜로드들이 테넌트를 구하기 위해서 더 많은 인센티브를 주고 있다. 그런데 이제 어디에 지금 포커스가 되느냐 하면 private equity firm이라는 그 웰스 매니지먼트 컴퍼니들 있죠. 네, 그 웰스 매니지먼트 컴퍼니들이 이제 빌딩을 삽니다. 손님들의 돈을 불려주기 위해서. 그런데 이 웰스 매니지먼트 컴퍼니들, 블랙스톤, 블랙록 이런 사람들은 빌딩을 오래 킵하는 게 목적이 아니라 빨리 프로핏을 만들어서 파는 거거든요. 그래야 손님들의 돈이 늘어나니까. 그러니까 어떻게 빌딩 값을 올리냐 하면 이제 렌트롤이 좋아야 되죠. 렌트 인컴이 높으면 거기에 캡 레이쇼 계산을 해서 빌딩 값을 높이 받을 수 있으니까 테넌트를 무조건 채워라. 채우는데 어떻게 채우느냐? 인센티브를 주자. 그래서 지금 이제 블랙스톤 같은 데서는 TI라고 테넌 임프루먼트 이제 돈을 보통은 랜로드가 이렇게 이제 인테리어를 해주든지 아니면 그걸 돈으로 받는 경우가 많거든요. 그러면 이제 테넌트가 돈을 보태서 자기네 인테리어를 만든다. 그런데 보통 뭐 한 30불 정도를 이제 보통 생각을 해요. 테넌트가 돈을 달라고 그러면 우리가 하겠다 그러면 근데 그런 거를 한 3배 정도씩 이제 제공을 한다. 그런 얘기인데 이제 블랙스톤 같은 데서 그렇게 하기 시작하면 다른 랜로드들도 마찬가지 오피스 테넌트를 구하기 위해서 그런 것을 제공을 한다. 이런 좀 뉴스가 나와 있습니다. Okay, the next news is we're going to talk about the Blackstone property. Blackstone is also a wealth management company, and I quoted a few times about the Blackstone. What they're saying is Blackstone Property Fund passes 50 billion through Blackstone REITs. what's happening is Blackstone type of company usually have kind of big investors, okay? But the interesting phenomena is Blackstone Real Estate Income Trust, okay? This sometimes REITs we call investment trust, but they say income trust. The fund sold in increments as little as 2,500 has raised more than 50 billion since it started 5 years ago. So this Blackstone company, what they started is they received a small individuals fund as little as 2,500. So you and me can invest money to this Blackstone REITs, okay? And by the way, Blackstone REITs company is not a non-trade public company. So they filed everything to SEC, but a non-traded company. Okay, there are different kinds of REITs, right? I think last year, one time we went over about what kind of REITs available in the market. But anyway, so they started 5 years ago. Now this fund reached to 50 billion. This is not a joke. All small individuals. So they're looking into also this market. In other words, there are so many individuals, okay, small amount of money, 2,000, 3,000, 10,000, whatever, small amount of money, they invest money to this kind of companies. I want to check it out because they lure the investors partly by paying them an annual yield. Annual yield is 4% to 5%. Like you can imagine like a dividend, 4% to 5%, far more than government bonds in recent years and some other stocks. And but also this kind of investment vehicle loaded up a property that has enjoyed rising values. We're talking about how the equity firms increase their wealth for their investors, right? Fill up the tenant and raise the value, and then they sell. Okay. So that's what they're talking about. Especially they purchased the warehouses and the rental apartment complexes even as the pandemic has raised. So they made a good profit. And that's why the combination of yield and rising property value produced an average annual return of, can you believe this, 15.2%. So combined. Okay, so to combine the yield and the property value increase, so combined the return is 15.2% for the 3 years that ended December 31st, according to this company. And this company tracks the non-traded REITs market only. 블랙스톤은 몇 번 여러분들이 말씀드렸지만 웨alth 매니지먼트 컴퍼니고요. 요즘에는 뭐 웨alth 매니지먼트 컴퍼니 굉장히 많아서 예를 들어서 큰 은행도 웨alth 매니지먼트를 따로 하고요. 그러나 이제 전문화된 그런 컴퍼니 중에 하나가 블랙스톤인데 블랙록도 있고 이 사람들이 큰 인베스터들을 주로 상대를 하죠. 그러나 5년 전서부터 이 조그만 작은 인디비주얼도 상대를 해서 적게는 2,500불씩도 투자할 수 있게 해서 그 펀드가 지금 50 빌리언 달러에 이르렀다. 그런 얘기고요. 이 사람들이 어떻게 리턴을 이제 만들어주냐 하면 yield, 그러니까 운영해서 이제 남는 이익도 있지만 이제 프로퍼티 밸류가 올라가니까 부동산의 가장 큰 장점은 그대로 yield도 있지만은 밸류도 올라가니까 두 개를 컴바인해서 리턴이 15.2%나 된다. 그런 보도가 있었습니다. Okay, next news is higher bond yields, better stocks. 스탁 하시는 분들, okay. So those who are involved with the stock, the higher bonds yield better stocks. The stock again is fluctuated, is went down basically. That's what we're talking about. So as we looked at, the 10-year treasury yield went up like even 1.866% from 1.771% Friday. So it creates basically selling mode. So S&P 500 went down 1.8%, and Dow Jones went down 1.5%, and Nasdaq went down 2.6%. So it's kind of interesting start of the year. And Ross Mayfield says the uncertainty around the timing and pace of the Fed's action. Fed action, we're talking about Fed action, when they're going to raise the reference rate. And so it will likely keep the market on edge for the first half of the year. So it's going to be fluctuate at least during the first half of the year. And he added the market turbulence has been most acute across growth stocks, okay? And which, so it's mostly damage to give the damage to negative damage to the growth stock, which has had the worst start to a year relative to value stocks since 1995. So the stock market is experiencing the turbulence because the yield, higher bond yields, but because of with no Fed position, Fed saying they're going to increase the interest rate. Well, as I said, some people are saying this year 5 times, or even worst case 7 times, that they're going to increase. And each increase, usually they go by 0.25%. 오케이. 지금 그 스탁 일드가 이제 올라가는 바람에 일드가 올라간다는 얘기는 10-year treasury 일드를 많이 판다는 얘기죠. 값이 싸지니까 일드, 반드 일드는 올라간다. 그래서 지금 그게 스탁에 영향을 줘가지고 스탁이 지금 축축축 떨어졌다. 그런 뉴스고요. 그래서 아마 스탁이 첫 시작이 별로 안 좋은데 올해 아마 그런 터뷸런스가 한 반년도까지는 올해 상반기는 계속 그렇게 갈 것 같다. 그런 지금 뉴스고요. The next news is economists to cut back growth forecast as threats pile up. A lot of threats right now. So they adjusted the Wall Street Journal survey. According to this survey, the expectation for growth in the first quarter by more than a percentage point. First quarter growth forecasted to 3% from their forecast of 4.2% October survey. So they readjusted forecast for first quarter growth from 4.2% to 3%. So not so good. And well, we see all this reason. Inflation can be the reason right now, and also supply chain is all related. Supply chain disruptions, and so all these uncertainties. The growth, first quarter growth forecasted adjusted to 3% from 4.2%. 지금 그 경제학자들이 여러 가지 그 이제 위협이 이제 쌓여져 가지고 결국은 올해 1분기 성장률을 예상을 4.2%에서 3%로 내린 상황이다. 여러 가지 우리가 많이 듣고 있죠. 인플레이션이라든지 supply chain disruption이라든지 그 다음에 이제 페드가 아까도 얘기했지만은 지금 계속 이제 이자율을 이제 올리겠다 하고 있는 그런 상태여서 어떤 지금 보도는 3월 달보다 더 땡겨지지도 않느냐 뭐 이런 얘기까지도 지금 나오고 있습니다. Okay. Sorry. Next news is we're going to talk about inflation. 7%. This is very interesting period because back in 1980, 1981, we had, by the way, on the Carter administration. Now, as a Biden administration, we are experiencing pretty much the same thing. At that time, the inflation rate was even 13.6%. And interest rate at the time is high teens. And I remember like a mid of 1980s, I purchased my own house. Interest rate was 30-year interest rate was about 13%. So right now we're talking about 3%. So it's about 10% lower than back then, that the time that I purchased the home. Jimmy Carter, yeah, at the time it was Jimmy Carter. So they are comparing that period, 1980, 81, that time period right now is pretty much similar. But back then, within a few years, they controlled. At the time, Fed chair was Paul Volcker. Okay, he controlled. And see here, the Fed benchmark interest rate reached to 19% in 1981, and a much deeper recession began. But by the summer of 1982, inflation and interest rate were both falling sharply, so they controlled. But right now, but after that, 4 decades, about 40 years, generally low single-digit inflation would follow. But right now, it's keep going up. So we don't know when it's going to be end. 지금 인플레이션이 제일 걱정들을 많이 하고 있는데요. 현재 지금 10% 올라갔다. 근데 1980년도, 81년, 82년도에 카터 대통령 당시에 비슷한 상황이 있었는데 그때는 이제 결국 1981년도 그 이후에 82년도 서머 때 이 페드 체어 폴 볼커라는 사람을 통해서 이때는 굉장히 타이트한 머니터리 작전이었다고 그래요. 지금은 돈을 많이 푸는 작전이고 그때는 타이트 머니터리 팔리시를 통해서 결국은 1981 서머에 컨트롤이 됐다. 그리고 그 다음부터는 한 40년을 인플레이션이 쭉 그대로 이제 거의 큰 무리를 갖지 않고 내려오고 있었다. 근데 지금 이제 7%, 글쎄 이게 이제 더블 디지트까지 올라갈지는 아직 모르겠는데요. Okay, next news is kind of interesting. It's beyond my imagination, but Microsoft buys Activision Blizzard for nearly, they paid $70 billion cash. I cannot believe this. This basically, after all, is a game company. But these days, the game companies is not a joke because they have technology like what virtual tour in real estate, virtual reality. I mean, we use virtual tour. We're using virtual reality technology, but it's a game company like the famous Candy Crush. I don't know anything about game business, by the way. Call of Duty, etc. This kind of I think is a big product, and so it's a competition out there. As you know, now is Meta, formerly is Facebook. Facebook is also in virtual reality the market. And the Microsoft want to compete with this kind of companies. So they spent cash to pay $70 billion to buy basically the maker of this kind of a game products called Activision Blizzard. 마이크로소프트가 놀랍게도 우리는 마이크로소프트 그러면 뭐 이런 쪽은 아닌 것 같은 생각을 할 수도 있는데 $70 빌리언 캐시를 주면서 이 게임 컴퍼니를 사들였다. 왜냐하면 게임 컴퍼니들이 가지고 있는 것이 지금 버추얼 리얼리티 이런 테크놀로지이기 때문에 지금 마이크로소프트가 그쪽으로 들어가려는 거죠. 페이스북 같은 회사들을 대항해서. 마이크로소프트는 by the way 그 미래가 가장 좋은 컴퍼니로 넘버1 컴퍼니로 여러 가지 이제 면을 분석했을 때 월스트리트저널이 한번 보도한 적이 있거든요. 앞으로 100년 동안 가장 든든하게 지속될 컴퍼니 중에 마이크로소프트가 넘버1인데 아무튼 이런 엄청난 돈을 두고 이 게임 컴퍼니를 사들였다. 오케이. 자, 그 라스트 텍 아더 뉴스 쪽은 iPhone can be a car key. Well, everybody has a cell phone these days, without an exception. So the cell phone can be a car key. In other words, we get rid of car key. We open the car with our cell phone, and we start the engine by our cell phone. Is it possible? Yes, it is possible. And the Hyundai, some brands, and Genesis might use iPhone digital car app to open car and start engine within this year. It's a possibility. So I think we can do it. And also, in my opinion, the next big wave would be open our house door with our cell phone. Why not? We are too tired to keep our metal keys, so many metal keys in our pocket, right? So we're going to get rid of all these, and we can use a cell phone to open my house door, my apartment door, and also we can start the car. We can do pretty much with the cell phone. We get rid of thousands of years old metal keys. Finally, 아이폰으로다가 이제 올해는 그 차를 열고 엔진을 시작할 수 있는 그런 앱도 지금 개발 중이다. 그래서 현대 몇 가지 기종하고 제네시스에 그것이 올해에 들어갈 것 같다라는 보도가 블룸버그 통신을 통해서 있었습니다. Okay, that's it for today's news. And thank you for joining us, and we're going to see you next week.